Tariffs, Donald Trump and trade wars. It's been another week where the US president has dominated the headlines. This time his so-called Liberation Day tariffs have sent shockwaves around the world. So for this week's episode I've decided to come here to the heart of Britain's financial district, the City of London and the Bank of England. Here, as they have around the world, stock exchanges have been thrown into turmoil. Huge losses have been seen on some of the world's biggest companies. The global financial system is effectively resetting itself. It basically needs to get used to the world that we find ourselves in now. There's not a huge amount at the moment to say that's good about tariffs, but they're not a new phenomenon. In the past, they've shaped economies, toppled governments, and even led to real wars. From empire and the Opium Wars to the Great Depression and the modern system of commerce, trade wars and tariffs have been causing chaos for centuries. I want to look back at some of those episodes in history. Welcome to History Counts. In the 17th and 18th century, most trade between countries was carried out under a system called mercantilism. European empires basically believed that if you traded with other countries, it was a zero-sum game. One of them had to win and one of them had to lose. The logical conclusion of that is that countries had to protect themselves. Britain decided to do exactly that and passed something called the Navigation Acts. That required colonies of Britain all around the world to trade only with the mother country. But limiting trade like that led to increased tensions, it led to increased smuggling. It even contributed to the American Revolution and the independence of the United States, something that is kind of ironic when you consider what's happening today. But Britain's biggest domestic argument about trade laws and about tariffs came in the wake of the Napoleonic Wars. The government passed something called the Corn Laws. These were a tariff on imported grains into the United Kingdom, which were designed to protect British farmers by making foreign grain more expensive. The problem was that overall the price of grain skyrocketed and made life pretty miserable for people working in cities. After years of debate and a devastating famine in Ireland, Robert Peel, the British Prime Minister in 1846, finally repealed the Corn Laws. He did so at a cost. It ended his political career and it split his Conservative Party. By the mid-19th century, however, Britain was already involved in other trade disputes, the most infamous of which was the Opium Wars. China tried to restrict foreign trade coming into his country in order to try and curb an opium crisis that was gripping the country, but the British, who were making huge amounts of money by selling opium from India into China, refused to stop. The result was a trade war that became an actual war. China lost, and it was forced to sign humiliating treaties that allowed British access into their markets. Countries often find themselves turning to protectionism when their economies are struggling, and that happened in the 1930s in the midst of the Great Depression. In 1930, the US passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff. The idea was to tax imports into America in an effort to protect US jobs. But in the end, other countries retaliated, global trade effectively collapsed, and the Great Depression got even worse. It's a key lesson in how trade wars can easily backfire. And if we fast forward to the 1980s, America found itself again in a trade war, but this time with Japan. The US government accused Japan of flooding its market with cheap cars and electronics. The response? Quotas and tariffs. There were even agreements forcing Japan to limit its exports. Fortunately, perhaps for the world, this didn't evolve into a full-blown economic crisis, but it did mean that manufacturers sent their jobs and their factories from Japan to the US, perhaps something that Donald Trump wants to replicate this time. That changed world trade forever. In his first term in office, Donald Trump gave some hints of what was to come this time around. He started a trade war in 2018 with China. The Trump administration accused China of unfair trade practices, and China hit back with its own tariffs. The result? Raised prices, disrupted supply chains, and an ongoing battle for economic dominance between the two new superpowers of the world. This week we entered a new chapter in the struggle for supremacy between the world's two superpowers. How it turns out is anybody's guess. We could see a breakdown in global trade like we did in the 1930s, a global slowdown, and even, potentially, a global recession. Or maybe Donald Trump's tariffs will work. maybe countries will roll over and move manufacturing into the US and boost the US economy. One thing is for certain, the uncertainty that we're seeing now isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and it's already having real-world effects. Trade wars shape history, and this week's events could easily turn out to be just as important as those we've discussed in today's episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Please do leave your feedback and your comments below, and I'm still a channel just starting out, so any subscriptions, any views, any shares are hugely appreciated. Thank you so much for watching.